So, of course, immediately after recording the last episode, I thought of the perfect metaphor right after we were done. So can I lead with that right now?
Do it.
If you didn't listen to our last episode, I would actually hit pause on this right now and go to the previous one. It's called Death of a Generalist. And Carrie and I attempted to put 3, maybe 3.5, daggers into this idea of the generalist consultant and hopefully call them the questions and some reasons why that's a viable path in today's marketplace. And the metaphor that came to mind after we finished recording, Carrie, was think about it from a job perspective. If you want to, I'm going to make up an example here. If you want to interview to become a CTO, okay, but the hiring manager, likely the CEO, looks at your resume and you've done some technology work, you've done some IT work, you've done some marketing, you've done some operations, you've done some finance, you've done some strategy, like you've done a bunch of random things. Obviously, the question is, how exactly are you qualified to be a CTO? Like, we understand that, right? We need to have a relevant experience to be able to ascend the corporate ladder and to get that next high paying position. Like we get that, obviously. No one's climbed the corporate ladder without that. But yet we don't think the same way about the consulting business. And this doesn't mean that you can't be a generalist. You can be a generalist and maintain the status quo. You can be a generalist and earn the same amount of money you're earning for years and years and years to come, maybe a little bit less as pricing gets pushed down. But the key distinction here to me is specialists get ahead. Specialists get promoted, right? Specialists earn higher fees. Specialists become more in demand. Generalists become less in demand over time, and the pricing gets pushed down to the bottom. So it's kind of the same as if you were an employee in a job. Are you satisfied doing the same job day in and day out for the rest of your career, or do you want a promotion?
Well, and just to maybe expand on that, generalists have choice, right? Generalists have not just opportunities, but opportunities that they can select from. And, that's why most of us leave employment. So, imagine that we're taking it one step further and now you're in a position where you're actually choosing what it is that you do.
So let's talk about that transition, because I think that's the thing that people get really stuck on. I often hear people say, look, I get it. I'd love to be a specialist. I see the benefit in doing so. But how do I get from where I am to where I want to be? Given that the really immediate thing that scares people is, well, I've got 3, 4, 5 clients right now, and I've got a network that sends me random projects. And if I all of a sudden claim specialization, does all of that work dry up all of a sudden?
Yeah. So what we're here to promote is that becoming a specialist is a staged approach. So we talk about it and, maybe it feels like it's oversimplified when we do these little 20-minute blurbs on the podcast, right? Because what we're trying to get people to is the end state. But we're very aware that there's a path to get from where you are to where you want to be. And it's very staged, it's very planned, and it's very strategic. So the fear that a lot of consultants have is niching down, right? Picking their specialization, immediately turning away all other work and starving to death. And that's not how it works and not what we're talking about at all.
And perhaps we can ground this in what we see, because we've helped over 1,000 consultants and counting make this very specific transition. So let's take people through what we practically see. This is not even our opinion or how it should be done, but this is practically how consultants have made the transition from generalist to specialist. The first stage, if you will, is deciding to narrow, deciding to focus. That is deciding that you no longer want to be a generalist doing random things for random clients or random projects for random clients or solving random problems, that you want to narrow your focus for many of the reasons we've talked about in the previous episode and beyond. And often what happens there is you don't end up narrowing yourself into your final destination. You don't go from 0 to 100, right? If 0 is generalist, then 100 is like the perfect level of specialization. In that first stage, you go a little more narrow than you are right now. You identify a slightly more specific target market. You hone in on a smaller set of problems that you can solve. And you can't go too far down the road, because at the end of the day, you need to do a certain level of work. You need to work with more clients, you need to get more experience to enable further specialization. So if the fear is, well, like I'm having trouble going from 0 to 100, you don't need to go from 0 to 100. You need to go from 0 to 20 or 30, and then let your client projects and your experience delivering those projects and the results and so on and so forth determine and inform how you further narrow your focus. I tell people all the time that positioning is a journey, not an event. It doesn't just happen, but it's a series of steps that are taken over time.
Yeah. And what's really great is what you'll find is, even if you have only taken that 20% step in that direction, you'll start to see the benefits. You'll start to see them quickly. And that takes us to phase 2, which is to continue to build that specialization while you're earning. And the reason I say that is this, often when consultants think about this, they think about it as giving something away. But really what we're talking about is building the business that you have in your specialization to the point where it starts to crowd out all the other random stuff. And so it's not about you saying, no, I don't want to do these things, and then waiting for other business to come. It's truly about getting to a place where now you have so much opportunity in the area that you want to have it, that it's easy to say no to the other things. It's easy to not look for them. It's easy to walk away from them. It's easy to start telling people what it is that you truly do.
So I had this chat with a client a couple of weeks ago, and she was working through the positioning work and really doing a great job of narrowing the focus and getting really clear on what she wants to do. And it was fantastic. And then she presented this problem to me. She goes, look, the problem is I'm getting all this other business outside of the scope.
Yeah.
We've got all these opportunities, and like I'm batting them away, but I still need some revenue. I go, oh, hold on. You're allowed to take those deals in the short term. You are permission granted, right? You are allowed to take on those deals because you're still building. You're not going to go and fill up your revenue perfectly with clients in your new area of specialization within your new narrow focus overnight. That's not going to happen. Realistically, you'll need to rely on some of those network-driven opportunities that are all over the place while you hone in and commercialize and develop business for the new area of specialization. So, to your point, like, don't feel like you need to cut off everything you did in the past and like there's a line in the sand. There was before and there's after. No. You can take on business that comes from your network. That's still going to come, by the way. And you can use that as a transition, right? Until you get to the point where you have a sufficient amount of business within the focus or the specialization. And a quick another story here just to illustrate this point. So we had a client years ago who ran a kind of a branding agency, and he had a particular target market that made up about 80% of his business. And his positioning was broad, like it was industry agnostic. And we looked at it and we said, well, this makes no sense, right? Like 80% of your business comes from market X, but you're maintaining broad positioning. And the fear was, well, we do 20% comes from elsewhere. What if that stuff dries up? And that's a significant chunk of change still, right? We helped him get over the fear. He doubles down on market X, ends up becoming more active on LinkedIn now that he has a really clear point of focus to speak to, and develops more of a name for himself and more recognition, builds a platform, and lo and behold, business in market X picked up and business in other markets picked up because all of a sudden he became more visible. People started seeing him more often. He had a reason to be recognized and to be known. And again, had the same conversation with him. Look, in the short term, if that revenue is helpful and you need it, take it. But the goal is to get you to the point where you're turning that business away because you're too busy within your new area of focus.
Absolutely. And what is really exciting about that and kind of fun when we're working with clients is you almost don't realize it's happening. It sneaks up on you. you're working away, you're doing your thing, and all of a sudden you look back and you say, wait a minute, for the last 6 months, I've only been doing this thing that I truly wanted to focus on at these great rates. And suddenly everything has changed. So it's not about forcing that transition, as we're saying. It's about putting the things you need to put in place to make it happen. And then just, letting that run and paying attention enough to know when you've actually made that shift.
And that brings us to the third stage, which is exclusive focus and specialization. That is, you've defined, and this might at this stage might be even more narrow, might be even more focused than it was at the first stage on the back of your experience. But now you've decided, this is my market, this is who I serve, this is the problem I solve, this is how I solve it. All things we cover, by the way, in the Power Positioning Workshop, powerpositioningworkshop.com. And this is what I do. And so if the network gives you an opportunity for something else, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to refer you to somebody else because that's not what I do, right? This is now the steepest part of the curve, because now, I like to talk about this concept called compounding expertise, right? We're all familiar with compound interest or compound returns. Put your money in the stock market and do it earlier, because every year those returns compound. And that's how you get kind of, exponential nonlinear growth. Expertise is the same. The more you apply your expertise to a specific area of focus, the more that expertise compounds. So now that you're spending 100% of your time solving a single problem for a single type of client, and if you can work with 10 clients in the year, then you're doing 10 projects within that very specific area of focus, your expertise compounds much faster than it did when you can only spend 20, 30, 40% of your time doing that type of work. And then fees go up, cost of delivery goes down, margins grow.
Yeah. And also, in a very exciting way, the effort that you have to put into your business development starts to shrink. At the beginning, when you are running all over the place, talking to all the people about all of the things, it's a lot of effort, right? It's a lot of conversations. It's a lot of, whatever it is that you're doing, outreach, or, going to conferences, whatever the case may be. Once you have niche down, once you're clear on your specialty, you can work so much smarter, right? You can put yourself in the highly refined groups of people who care about what it is that you do. You can make sure right off the bat, you can qualify people before you even speak to them, because you have a clear set of criteria that tell you whether or not they are, the right person for what it is that you do. And so, we've talked about all the upside in terms of growth and in terms of, efficiency of your delivery, but it also, quite frankly, creates an efficiency on the business development side.
Imagine a client asks you, when you're probably getting this question, you don't have to imagine it. Client says, or prospect says, have you done this for a client like us before? And right now you panic, right? And you're trying to mentally fit a bunch of broad experiences into this situation, make it work. Well, we did this for this client, and they can sense the mental gymnastics you're going through to make your experience fit their situation. And it's probably not working, right? But imagine if they asked that question and they said, have you done something like this for a client like us before? And you said, about 10 times. Here are the stories. Client X, client Y, client Z, whatever, right? You have an abundance of stories, anecdotes, social proof, testimonials, case studies that are squarely in that target market, match their context, match the problems that they're facing, match the outcomes they're trying to get. You don't need to sell very hard at that stage.
Yeah. So, to close, what we're saying here is that this transition, while important, isn't necessarily as dramatic as people often feel that it would have to be. It's about, being really strategic, being really focused, but practical. Practical meaning, yes, continue to earn money, continue to do the things that you're doing, continue to take the referrals, but know that there's an end state that's going to put you in a significantly better position. And all in all, the risk, and again, we started this conversation on the last episode talking about concerns and fears that consultants have about specializing. And I hope by now it's clear that the risk isn't in specializing, the risk is in not.
Because the alternative here, and I think practically this path to full specialization, in my experience, and this is not super scientific, this is kind of anecdotal, it's 1 to 3 years. Rarely do I see this completely happen within a year, and usually gets done within 3. 1 to 3 years is kind of typically to make, and you're making money the entire time, don't get me wrong, but to completely transition to the point where you have no need or desire to take on business outside of your specialization because you're sufficiently busy. It's about a 1 to 3 year transition. The alternative is maintain your generalist credentials, keep doing random projects, random clients, and then 10 years from now, you've done a bunch of work and it feels like you have nothing to show for it. It feels like you have no good answer to the question, why should we choose to work with you? Because your track record's a dog's breakfast of experience.